Pause. Read Catching Murphy, the latest book from the Associated Press, available now exclusively at Amazon.com.
7:36 AM 560 Traffic Center time, and Jim Talamonte.
Northbound Tri-State traffic is slow from LaGrange Road to 47th and from the Reagan Tollway to past the Eisenhower. Eastbound Reagan Tollway jammed from the Aurora Toll Plaza to 59. Northbound Veterans Memorial delays are from the Fountain Toll to the Reagan Tollway. Aiden's 26 minutes Lake Hook to Montrose. Kennedy, 46 minutes O'Hare to downtown, a little quicker than the Express. Eisenhower, 48 minutes, 390 to the Burn Circle. The Stevenson runs 53 minutes, 355 Lakeshore Drive. The Ryan, 28 minutes, 95th to downtown. I-57 Bishop Ford, both 29 minutes, I-80 to the Merge. Lakeshore Drive is heavy southbound before Belmont to North Avenue. Northbound from the Stevenson to Jackson. Northwest Indiana looks great. That's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from the 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning Weather Center. A colder day ahead with a little bit of sunshine popping through this morning. Clouds this afternoon, high 39. Clear to partly cloudy overnight, low 26. 30 right now. Next news coming up at 8. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continue next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Get Down to Business with Shalom Klein, the show for business and jobs powered by Tandem HR. Heard Sunday evenings at 6.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and fascinating piece in Quillette.com, about the so-called leisure class. Rob Henderson is a PhD candidate at the University of Cambridge. He got his undergraduate degree at Yale. He's a veteran of the U.S. Air Force. Oh, boy. Must have been tough for him at Yale, having served in the military and all. And we'll have to make sure we refer to him by his proper rank, too. I don't want to get in Devin Nunes trouble. But the piece is about the elites in society. He writes, in the past, people displayed their membership of the upper class with their material accoutrements. But today, luxury goods are more affordable than before. People are less likely to receive validation for the material items they display. This is a problem for the affluent who still want to broadcast their high social position. So they've come up with a clever solution. They've decoupled social status from goods and reattached it to beliefs. For more on this topic, a little bit deeper dive, we're pleased to be joined by the aforesaid Rob Henderson, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Cambridge. Rob, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to be here.
This diagnosis that you provide, decoupling social status from goods and reattaching it to beliefs. So when did that transition occur? I mean, there are still things that you can have that confer goods that you can have that confer social status. Not every member of the elite class has a private plane, for example. So why isn't it private planes or luxury yachts or something that a small fraction of the 1% possess that still separates them from the hoi polloi?
Yeah, so I think a lot of this change occurred with the rise of social media. And I don't mean to say that, things like yachts or private jets don't confer status, but I do think that in the modern world, it's not as trendy to sort of display your status with your private jet. I mean, if you take pictures of yourself on your yacht, people aren't going to think that you're high status. I mean, they will think that, but they will also think a little bit poorly of you as well. Mm-hmm. That you're bragging or showing off or something like that. But if you display certain beliefs, not only do you get to say, I'm a member of the upper class, but you also get to win moral accolades. Oh, not only is he's well off, but he's also a morally upstanding person for having the right beliefs.
Well, who vilified the rich? I mean, was it a political party who made it bad to be rich in America? Yeah,
I mean, I think probably the most recent example might be something like Occupy Wall Street. where it became fashionable to sort of bash, the financial elites.
Right, but so we've gone from a place now that just trying to get the status thing. So it used to be Robin Leach's Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, profiling their villas and possessions. And now the show for social status for the elite is something like Bill Maher's Politically Incorrect, where they can go on his show and talk about how they drive a Tesla.
Right. So I think a lot of people today are displaying what I refer to as luxury beliefs. So, as you mentioned, I'm a PhD student at Cambridge. I study social psychology, and based on a lot of research, social status is very important. And, studies show that respect and admiration from our peers is even more important for our well-being than how much money we make. And so today, displaying these beliefs increase our status more so than displaying our money.
And so, why is it beliefs? Well, so if it's luxury beliefs, beliefs that attach, that confer status, why is it only beliefs on the left? In other words, why is it the Marxist beliefs? Why is it the trans rights movement, pro-trans rights beliefs that confer status, and not, not like a Mike Rose beliefs talking about dirty jobs, or or a Nick Gillespie over at Reason.com talking about entrepreneurship and the morality and power of markets? Why don't those confer status, but all of the left's beliefs do?
So I think that the left doesn't necessarily have a monopoly on luxury beliefs, although I do think that, they tend to be more vocal about them, say. So, things that I mentioned in my Quillette piece on luxury beliefs, things like sexual promiscuity or open borders, I think those are more associated with the left. Although I think the right, things like, for example, although this is debatable perhaps, is trickle-down economics. I think that is arguably a luxury belief for the right. And something that I mentioned in my essay as well, something like the anti-vaxxer movement. Now, the most prominent anti-vaxxers are, happen to be the most wealthy, and they tend to be on the left. Although if you look at some of the research, anti-vaxxers are sort of evenly divided between the left and the right. And just to be clear, to define what I call luxury belief, it's something that confers status on the upper class while often taking a toll on the lower class. So it sort of makes the upper class person look great while also sometimes harming those below them.
So this is sort of what this sort of helps explain what Charles Murray was getting at in his book on the topic, roughly on the topic, Coming Apart, where he talked about elites, wealthy people who don't preach what they practice. They practice responsibility, personal responsibility, saving, family structure, but they don't preach it. They practice it because it's good for them. They don't preach it because preaching the opposite is also good for them because there's social status that's conferred by doing so.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So one thing that I noticed, for example, among my peers in undergrad at Yale is that in their public opinions and their expressions, they tend to be very much in favor of sexual freedom, championing, promiscuity and this kind of hookup culture. But then if you look at the people who get married and the people who are the least likely to get divorced, it tends to be the upper class. They have the lowest divorce rates, the highest marriage rates. And, one of the figures I actually cite from Charles Murray's book in my Quillette piece is the finding that in 1960, the number or the percentage of American children living with both of their birth parents was identical for both affluent and working class families. So 95% of children were born into a family with both of their birth parents who raised them. And by 2005, the number for affluent families was still 85%. So not too much of a change for them, but for working class families, it plummeted to 30%. So today, 30% of working class children are born into a single parent family, or rather, 30% are born to both their birth parents. 70% are born into some kind of single parent family or someone other than their parent.
So doesn't that sort of speak to the social contagion of the hypocrisy that Murray was describing?
Right. That's exactly. Yeah, I think there is this sort of the public position of a lot of the affluent is, do what you want, non-judgmental attitudes, everything goes. But then when you look at their private lives, in their sort of habits and their behaviors and the sort of virtues they practice, they very much live this sort of traditional life of, work hard, go to college, be patient, delayed gratification, get married. But then when you ask them, oh, what do you think about this or that, they say, oh, everything's fine. So in a way, I argue that they're sort of hoarding the sort of cultural and social capital for themselves, which is very much along the lines of what Charles Murray argues.
And Michael Schellenberger, who writes at Forbes, he had an interesting piece a while back about the climate change. He writes on environmental issues a lot. And talking about the hypocrisy, we focus in on, say, whether it's Greta Thunberg or Leonardo DiCaprio, they come into town on a private jet and tell you to turn off your electricity and build a windmill, and then they jet back off, and so the hypocrisy. And one of the things he explained, and I think this is along the lines of what you're arguing, is that hypocrisy, you look and you say, oh, what a hypocrite. But for the affluent, for the elites, that hypocrisy is part of the status. They play by a different set of rules, don't you understand? So when you call them a hypocrite, all you're doing is reinforcing, yes, you're right, the rules don't apply to me, they apply to you.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought too much about that, because I think that if you ask them, they wouldn't say that. They would say, they would come up with an excuse for why the rules don't apply, but they wouldn't necessarily flaunt that they don't apply. But I do agree that there is a lot of hypocrisy here, and this is something that I'm trying to point out. They have these beliefs that they display, but then in their private lives, it can often be very different.
He is Rob Henderson. He's a PhD candidate at the University of Cambridge. He did his undergrad at Yale University. He's also a veteran of our United States Air Force. Rob, thanks so much for joining us. Enjoyed the piece.
Thank you, Dan.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
If you have pain, listen up, Dennis Prager here. You don't need to live in pain. Let me repeat that. You don't have to live in pain. Chronic pain is the worst, whether it's from an accident or pain that just develops.